Okay, good morning. Yes, we're on. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit this morning. Well, talk and practice. So, the two things. Practice a little bit of the natural breath. So, natural breath, and it might sound like, why would you actually want to practice natural breath? Well, natural breath is, in a way, not what we do. Well, it is what we do, but we're usually breathing in a very disordered fashion, or we're holding our breath unnecessarily, either in the inhalation holding or the exhalation holding. It's more often holding at the end of the inhalation. And so, very important to actually get into an understanding of what natural breath is, the natural relaxed breath. We've been over the priming breaths and we've been through the breath work, how various methods and techniques of breath work help to either stimulate or pacify. Those are the two main sort of extremes. And obviously the breath starts to meet somewhere in between because it starts to balance. Here we're going to talk about the natural, uncoerced and unmanipulated breath. This is a breath which helps to open up, I call it the verification units. One verification unit, which I think is highly important to understand in this day and age, especially after the period of time that we've been through with the having to self-isolate, contact to others via a medium of Zoom, Skype, and the various sort of internet possibilities. And this is not to disparage those amazing sort of advances in technology whereby we can still communicate. But let's remember, it's our senses primarily with sight and hearing that preside through that communication. And our mind is interpreting the stimuli through those two main senses predominantly. The senses that are excluded are the interactional touch, the smell, and obviously the taste. And you might say, well, we can actually feel another person through this interaction. This is true. How much of it is a mind interpretation based around words that have been said, around phrases that have been reacted to, around certain memories and experiences and tendencies and impressions that have disoriented the real interaction? And we say, well, that is the real interaction. Is it? And let's talk about a face-to-face interaction for a second, just to compare. So a face-to-face interaction, which is not what this is, of course. What other senses will be involved? Well, as we said, we talked about the touch sensation, the immediate proximity touch sensation, which, if you are obviously touching another person, you get that sense. Let's talk about smell a little bit, the pheromonal stimulus that you get, the molecular sort of stimulus, the chemoreceptive awareness of the ligands that are passing through the atmosphere and the environment, to obviously the epithelial sort of tissue around the inner conchae, the ethmoid region, and the boma region. There has been so much research to show that there are pheromonal receptor sites in these areas, and so you're literally verifying the input from your eye sense, your ear sense, your touch, even your taste, and verifying it through this pheromonal input. Am I actually really sensing this person? Am I really in interaction with this person? Or is it something that my visual sense and my auditory sense are starting to beguile the mind with? Could be this is a very important sense, and one that is atrophying through each decade that passes, through artificial scents, through perfumes, through the need to disguise smell, to to put away all those bad, in inverted commas, smells that we get, through the smell of, I don't know, the things we don't like. We try to disguise them, don't we? We try to put them into a place where we don't have to, take on that scent, or cover it over with other scents. Now, in animals, what sort of priority did he put onto this smell sense? Well, the smell sense is the stimulation of the olfactory nerve, and also the sense of that molecular appreciation through those areas around, the parts of the nose that I talked about just now. But also the many mammals, reptiles, even birds will also have an organ which is highly developed, very highly developed in many cases, called the vomer-nasal organ. So the vomer-nasal organ, or the VNO. It's also called the Jacobson's organ. And its primary job is to pick up pheromones and interpret them, or send them off to the hypothalamus to be interpreted. You possibly have seen horses in the paddock making this sort of gesture with their mouth. And you might say, well, this horse is angry with me. But this is because often we don't realize that they're trying to optimize the sense of this molecular input to verify the world through this VNO organ. And they're using their filtrum to let more of that scent reside in that organ. So the organ's actually a lot further down than most of the smell receptors. So closer towards the end of the nostrils and in towards the palate of the mouth. So quite deep. So quite a well protected organ in many regards. So we also have a filtrum, don't we? We have this little area just underneath here. Some people say, well, it's not for any purpose. I disagree. Just through my own sort of hypotheses. What if we were actually at one time really dependent upon this particular sense of perceiving the environment? Again, this would be a very important organ for a dog, for example, to pick out what is a friend and what is a foe. What is a dog that's ready for mating, a dog that's not, for example. Is this a smell that is causing aggression in me, or is this a smell that's causing, a need to connect? Is this stimulating a particular emotion, or is this, just, something that I can ignore? I wonder, and this is just again a hypothesis that I have running through my sort of weird mind, maybe, I don't know. And that is, what if we as human beings are becoming much more separated from the world due to the atrophy of these regions that we were once in intimate contact with? And have we actually completely lost it? I don't think that we have. Especially perhaps those people who resonate towards the therapeutic setting. Perhaps our sense of touch is a mutated form. Maybe we have more of a sensory awareness in our skin. Perhaps, this VNO is actually there and developed. They found it on some human beings and less present in others. Some people call it a diverticulum of the nasal septum, and that's coincidentally where usually the VNO usually is. Other people literally have the connections of a small version of, say, a cat. What if we're putting so much emphasis onto the eyesight and the hearing, and excluding these senses and becoming so much more mindy because of it, so much more abstract because of it, basing ourselves on the repetition and the echoes of the past or the projections into the future, rather than intimately verifying the present reality that's unfolding for us in a relational interaction. How important is that for a therapist? If we are working primarily as a psychologist, a psychotherapist, of course, we're putting a premise, an emphasis onto the interpretation and the analysis and the perspective of certain behavioral patterns and so on and so on and so on. It's very mentated. Whereas the interaction of a body-based therapist, a touch-based therapist, would, I feel, be inclusive of all of these senses. The verification centers, I think actually especially, become very instinctual. Of course, getting the sense of the tissues and the fluids and the potency. Let's put that into a different context just here, just to make it a bit more palatable to those more scientific types that might be, looking at craniosacral therapy, for example, or, various yoga therapy modalities. Let's talk about the tissue base as something that you can literally see, you can in some cases hear, but you can obviously touch as well. You can imbibe the sense of a person's tone in their muscles, for example. The fluids, what are we talking about there? Are we actually talking about the molecular, are we acknowledging the molecular world? And do we need more than just those auditory senses and the visual senses to perceive that molecular world? If that is truly the case, and these other organs that we were just mentioning just now, especially the sense of smell and the VNO itself, would be highly important in that interactional setting. So if we're going to get a sense of that fluid expression, that fluid relational sense, the way that health expresses itself through holism when the fluids are appreciated, then I feel that we are possibly going to be circumventing or stymieing our ability to sense those things through distance work. That I said it. Distance work, let's not put it into a particular category at the moment. Let's say that distant work is distant work. You're working at a distance via a medium that enables certain interactions, analyses, verification of certain behavior patterns, and so on and so forth. At that psychotherapeutic, counseling, psychologic level. If we start to interpret it as sensing the subtle world of really imbibing the true relational proximity-based interaction, then we're not circumventing the molecular world. We say, well, we are in the molecular world. Of course we're in the molecular world because I'm feeling my own body. Are we not talking there about the subatomic world? The tissue and the subatomic world. We've missed out the sort of meat in the sandwich. Let's call it the cheese in the sandwich for those vegetarians. I think we have. I think we miss out on that bit in the middle. The real molecular world where you're sensing the fluidity of the interaction, which is proximity based. Usually the first thing that I feel as soon as a person walks in the room, or even before they walked in the room, is the emotional surround, follow through of their proximity. This to me is a verification of their presence in the room, or close by, or coming into the room. If we're talking about the subatomic world, we're talking about the non-dual world. Really, we are. The non-dual world where the particle isn't just expressed as a particle, it's also expressed as a wave. This would be, to me, the potency world, if we're talking about it from a chi or prana or lung or ki perspective. This is the place where you can feel someone from a huge distance, the other side of the universe, but it will be missing something. And that one thing that I propose, just through talking at the moment, is that verification of proximity and verification of reality without the beguiling sort of distortions of the mind. And of course, if we're leading an interaction based on counseling, psychologizing, and just understanding a person's story, their narrative, this is all well and good, but this is not going to be what I would include here as, I guess, the craniosacral interaction. I'm talking craniosacral, any interaction that's body-based and involving those verification organs, senses. Okay, let's do a little bit of practice here. This is just to bring about a sense of natural breath. I think Patrick McCowan, the oxygen advantage chap, has really hit the nail on the head with this one. Appreciating and acknowledging the more Wim Hof, Soma type of breathwork practices, I think they really have their place. But when breathwork starts to transition through the sense of holism of your body, then it starts to become pranayama, so natural non-controlling of the breath, which of course, as I mentioned on the other posts, were open to Wu Wei. So let's just practice there. You're not going to see a lot, of course, because it's going to be a natural breath, but what if this philtrum just here is the area of not just the trigeminal sort of accumulation of nerve cells or nerve receptor sites, but also a funnel for the stimulation of that VNO, the molecular sort of verifier. What if it is also an area that it is sensitive. You've got the frenulum just beneath it, very sensitive structure tissue, which again opens up, yes, the trigeminal sort of sensory input. But what if it also helps to regulate that natural, normal breath, relaxed breath, where the breath is not needing to do anything, it's not needing to survive, it's not needing to overcome something, it's not needing to go into a fight-flight reaction. It's just a natural, normal breath. And again, the oxygen advantage crew tend to say that the natural, normal breath that tends to become shorter and shorter. This tends to go against convention, doesn't it? Rather than actually taking deep breaths, it gets shorter and shorter, to the point whereby things can possibly even become a little bit hypoxic, but it also become hypercapnic. The carbon dioxide builds up to the point where it's enticing the oxygen, so it can swap with the oxygen. That interchange takes place, and the balance, the homeostasis, naturally comes into effect. Wu Wei. We're not making the physiology change, it just happens by itself. The dilatation of the capillaries automatically happens through that natural breathing. Capillaries naturally dilate. The sinuses start to open when there isn't a forced breath, when it's just a natural breath over a period of time, and you're not reacting to a sense of, I'm not getting enough breath. If we can persevere with that, as long as it's not a dangerous situation, you're aware of it's not being a dangerous situation, then the oxygen hunger starts to turn into a stimulus for the body to balance itself. It opens up those capillaries, it opens up the sinuses, maxillary, frontal, sphenoid sinuses, with, and I talked about this in another post, the nitrogen oxide. So the nitrous oxide that's actually formed by enzymes that they actually produce this nitrogen oxide in the sinuses. As the sinuses start to open up more, it comes into the breath, and the nitrogen oxide itself helps to stimulate surfactant production. Again, dilates the capillaries 10 to 15%, which is quite significant. Okay, let's do a little bit of practice. Maybe you can still hear me. This isn't the most fantastic mic. Sometimes it's useful to bring the Darth Vader breath in, so the Ujjayi breathing. Slowing down on the out breath especially. It's the out breath that requires a little bit of extra length compared to the in breath, in order for the carbon dioxide not to be breathed out too fast. And this is the key principle for bringing balance back in again. It's not so much the needing to take in more oxygen, it's breathing the carbon dioxide out slowly. So the CO2, when it comes out slowly, enables more to be retained in the cells, in the blood, in order for the oxygen to swap with it. Probably not good to put too much of a count onto these things. Not here, not now. When we were doing the more technique-driven breath work, it's important to have a bit of understanding of the ratio of the breath. But here, just to know that the out breath is a little bit longer than the in breath to start off with, it will naturally take over anyway. And in the end, there'll be no particular ratio. It'll just be whatever the body requires, listening to the body. It possibly would be quite useful here as well to get a sense, first of all, around that philtrum. The philtrum area, that groove underneath the nose. The area of the entrance of the nostrils, just in and around the septum. After a period of time, when the breath becomes much less intensive, much shorter. The diaphragm relaxes, of course. The accessory breathing muscles, the neck and the shoulders, also start to relax. Then the sensitivity starts to unveil itself around that area, just inside the nostrils, and deep to the septum. What can happen sometimes is that breathing in this fashion, naturally, not coercing it, not forcing it, not manipulating it, just being aware of the area around the upper lip and around the inside of the nostrils, deep to nose and above the palate, the mouth, the hard palate. Then you might notice sensations starting to show themselves through the body, subtle vibrational sensations, not just in the area but on the rest of the body. Almost a little bit like the focal appreciation of these areas, or this area, has become like an ignition to the opening of these scintillating vibrations through the body, very subtle vibrations. Could this be a molecular appreciation opening up to the potency within the potency, the subatomic expression, the non-duality, no longer sort of having a differentiation between the environment and myself, and yet still having a molecular appreciation which has got a difference between me and the tree. There's an appreciation between the difference of myself, the feeling of myself, and the tree, and yet I can still feel the tree. Then I can start to possibly even feel the molecular expressions of the tree. And that's getting a bit freaky. Even easier to feel the molecular expressions of a human being or an animate being. Every now and then it might be that you require to take a deeper breath, which is your way. The body is asking to take a deeper breath. You take a deeper breath. Equally, it might be that you feel that you don't need to take a breath. Often with this pranayama, it will lead to a cessation of the breath, usually at the end of the out-breath, which is where the body doesn't feel like it needs to breathe anymore. The mind is relaxed. It's no longer separate from the body. It's intimately vibrating subtly as a whole. The cessation is called Kevalabhambaka, and it is rare for it to happen when one is breathing just through the mouth. It maybe always happens when one is breathing through the nose. Nose breathing is the default for a being with a respiratory system with airways, air passages, but the mouth is more of a survival orifice used obviously for eating, but also to take in massive gulps of air to utilize that oxygen as quickly as possible. When one is talking, and of course like I am at the moment, again the mouth is stimulated and the tongue is enacted upon just to do something. But when there's no talking, when there's silence, then the body gets more of a chance to do the talking.